Well, it's Pastor Rick McLaughlin with Grace Upon Grace, a ministry of Grace 25. Today I want to talk to us about how to deal with distractions in our day-to-day life. And dealing with distractions, we've looked at a couple lessons previously in the last week or so that are crucial for us to successfully implement what we're going to talk about today. First, we must give God control of our lives, our business, our careers, and ask Him to help us face the nagging distractions that we find day in and day out of life as we're trying to make an effort to start each day with a full heart of worship and praise. Assuming that you commit yourself to doing these things that we talked about previously daily, we'll look further at some ways to handle some of the frustrations and setbacks that we all face day in and day out. How many times you walked out to your car and there was a flat tire, or you got up late, or you came in and your boss gave you these demands that were impossible but had to be done immediately. We all face distractions. They come. So if we prepare ourselves each day and each morning, we put ourselves in the framework of putting God first and committing ourselves to Him and immersing ourselves in His presence, then we're able to handle these distractions. Everyone has distractions. We're going to look at King David and how he handled distractions. And in Psalms 55, David talks about this very thing. He was no stranger to frustrations. He knew about distractions of day-to-day life. As a king of Israel, he had to, what we might call a high-pressure job. Sometimes we might think that being a king is an easy position or being a leader is an easy position, but they come with its own stress and its own problems and own complications. David was also king, but he was also a political and a very great military leader. But he also was a spiritual leader of Israel. Like any leader, his action was scrutinized. And like any leader, when he made failures, they were magnified. When he failed big. And everyone knew about it. As David went out about his typical day, he faced complications of all sorts. In Psalms 55, he lists some of them. The first he draw your attention to is that he mentioned a destructive mental attitude. And how many of us have had that? In verse 2 he says, "My thoughts trouble me and I am distraught." In verse 4 of 55 he says, "My heart is anxious within me. The terrors of death assault me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me." Can you imagine being king and having these feelings? This is what the famous Zig Ziglar called stinking thinking. It's thinking thoughts that only serve to immobilize you, to paralyze you, cause you not to be able to move forward. It's thinking like, what's the use? Why should I even try? This project will never get off the ground. Or, what's the use? I'll never get over this problem. What's the use? I'm so far into this, I'm over my head. I'm outmatched. I'm bound to lose before I even start. If you feel this way from time to time, you're not alone. David felt this way. The great prophet Elijah felt this way. Many people feel this way. You know, I talk with people on and off in the last 40-some years of ministry, and when we do counseling, you know, you make suggestions for people to try something, and their attitude was always this: well, that's not going to work. What's the use? And it's not with those attitudes, with those thinkings. Besides having these destructive mental attitudes, another thing is to have determined enemies. In verse 10, David says, "Day and night they prowl the city walls. Malice and abuse are within it." Just verse 11 says, "Destructive forces are at work in the city. Threats and lies never leave its streets." It's a sad fact of life that some people in this world do not wish you well. If you're in business, they'll hope you fail. If you're a coach, they'll hope that your team will lose. If you teach a class, they hope your students won't perform up to par. If you're a pastor of a church, they hope the church splits, closes. If you have a little money, then people want it. So some days you don't see these people, but other days they are there and they're in your way. They distract you. They complicate your life. David had to deal with them too. Besides having bad mental attitude, having enemies, David talked about another thing called disloyal friends. It appears to be a fact that at some point every leader gets stabbed in the back. It hurts when you're attacked by your enemies. But you know, it's devastating when it comes from a friend. And maybe you've been there. Maybe you've had someone that you considered a friend, and for some reason or another, they stabbed you in the back. This can happen to people you associate with. It can happen to people you work with. It can happen to people that you go to church with. I know in my ministry, in my last 50-some years of ministry, I've always heard of horror stories about churches and what goes on. But you know, I never until about a couple of years ago experienced those horror stories. People that you work with and loved and cared for, just all of a sudden just rose up with what appeared to be hate in their spirit towards you and make accusations and accuse you of doing things that you never even thought of. When things like that happens, when people consider friends, it hurts. We also have to deal with the possibility when we have friends leave us for whatever reason. They might decide to go on to other groups of friends, to other ways of life, to other churches. And they're your friends. You enjoy being with them and fellowshipping with them. But for some reason they decide that they no longer want to be with you or associate with you or be a part of what you're a part of. It hurts. And David knew this. He says in verse 12, if any enemy was insulting me, I can endure it. If a foe was rising himself against me, I can hide from him. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friends, with whom I have once enjoyed with sweet fellowship as we walk with the throne at the house of God. Disloyalty is one of the complications that you and I have to deal with from time to time. But yet, David points out another distraction that he had to deal with. The desire to escape. Listen to verse 6 through 8. Oh, that I had the wings of a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I will hurry to a place of shelter, far from the tempest and the storm. Have you ever been there? Have you ever thought, if I could only run away, if I could only get away, I would leave? I believe everyone has at some point or another, some more than others. But here's the problem. If we're focusing on running, we're not focusing on doing the job I've given us. Think about the prophet Elisha. He comes to mind. He just performed a great miracles. Destroyed 300 prophets of Baal. Prayed fire down from heaven to consume an altar. And yet he heard that Jezebel was going to kill him. And what did he do? He ran. It's because he was running, he couldn't do what God had called him to do. When you and I are running away from what God has called us to do, then we can't do what God has asked us to do. See, the desire to escape can be a tremendous distraction in life. It causes us to possibly pursue the want ads. We really have no intention of changing jobs, but we just want to pacify ourselves. We want to get away from where we are. It causes us to daydream about being single if you're married. When you know that divorce isn't an option and you know that you've made that commitment. It causes us to spend time watching more TV than we should. We escape. We get away. It causes some people to eat more than they should. It causes some people to spend more money than they should, pursuing empty diversions. And it causes some people to abuse alcohol and others to abuse drugs. I'm talking about more than merely looking forward to a much-needed vacation, because we all need those. And I always encourage everyone in my church to always take a couple of weeks off, at least every 6 months, a week or so, to recharge your batteries, regenerate yourself. What I'm talking about is a desire that causes us to compromise our values and avoid our responsibilities. If you're like everyone else, you probably had to deal with this one time or another. These are some of the distractions through our day-to-day life. There are others. Maybe employee problems, employer problems, computer problems, money problems. Overextended schedules, can't get everything done that you need to do in a certain amount of time. Having to deal with contractors and businesses. How about you wouldn't get a flight, you're overbooked or you're delayed. You got more than you possibly do in a single day. If we're not careful, we'll find ourselves in a situation where you start each day with a bang and we'll end each day with a whimper. You and I need the power of God throughout the whole day. In Psalms 55, David shows us how to do it, how to get this. And I want to focus on verse 17. Every morning and noon, I cry out in distress. He hears my voice. So the principle that I want to leave with you today is simply this principle. Return to God again and again throughout the day. Return to God again and again throughout the day. Last week we talked about how to start your day right. It's a crucial part of experiencing God's power and His presence in your life. Just think of it this way. When you take a long journey, you have to stop along the ways. For example, when I drive from Kennesaw to my sister's house in Wichita, North Carolina, I had to stop along the way to refuel the car. I remember going out west and having to stop several times to refuel the car because it's not going to run without gas in it. And that's the way it is with our spiritual life. We have to prepare ourselves for the long journey. And if we want to experience God's presence in our life day in and day out, then we have to return to Him again and again throughout the days. The monastic communities, those are the priests and monks, have practiced this for years. They begin their day with prayer. Mid-morning, they pray. At noon, they stop working and pray again. Mid-afternoon, they stop working and pray. In the evening, as they finish the day, they pray again. Before they retire at night, they pray again. In some communities, they even get up in the middle of the night and pray. See, the idea is to return to God again and again throughout the day. It helps you remember that Christ is your constant companion. Whether you're at work, whether you're at home, wherever you might be. See, Jesus is available always, every moment of the day. And we can spend our day in his presence. But we must return to him throughout the day. Throughout the day, return to him again and again and again. And as you do this, David mentions some promises that we'll look at tomorrow in this passage of Scripture. But the point I want to leave with you today is this. Return to God again and again throughout the day. God bless you. Thank you for joining me. I hope this has been a blessing to you. If it has, will you please pass it on to your friends on Facebook. If you have prayer requests, please let me know. I'll be glad to pray for you. I covet your prayers for myself and for the ministry. And I pray that God will bless you exceedingly abundantly, more than you could ever ask or think. But as you draw close to him today, I pray that you feel his presence. God bless you, and have a grace-filled day.